You're just here because of diversity hiring? She said it with a smile, in front of the entire room, and they laughed like my presence was some kind of favor, like I didn't earn this seat, like I was lucky to be allowed in. I said nothing, but inside I was on fire. Every smirk, every snub, every closed door, I remembered all of it. 6 months later, that same conference room now has a plaque that says Whitney Johnson, founder and CEO, 42nd floor. I didn't clap back and I just bought the floor. Fan 1. They said I didn't belong. But they didn't have to say it with words. It was in their eyes. The way their voices dipped just slightly when I walked into the room. How no one offered a smile. No one scooted over to make space at the table. It was my first day at Everline Capital. Downtown Chicago, 42nd floor, views of the lake, the kind of job people fight for. But all I could feel was the tension. I introduced myself. No one remembered my name. When Carter, the senior analyst, finally acknowledged me, he said, "Oh, you're from the program, right." The way he said it, like I was some experiment. Not a real hire, not someone who'd earned her way in. I had graduated top of my class from Northwestern, published research, interned at 2 hedge funds, but none of that seemed to matter. To them, I was just a box they needed to check. And then came Danielle, power suit, heels that clicked like punctuation. She looked me up and down like I was some filing error. And with the fakest smile I've ever seen, she said, "You're just here because of diversity hiring." Silence, then laughter. Not everyone, but enough. I didn't flinch, didn't defend myself, didn't say a word. But in my mind, something clicked. This wasn't about belonging. This was about building. They wanted me to feel small, forgettable, temporary. So I made a decision. I would become permanent. Not by fighting for a seat at their table, but by buying the whole damn floor. But that comes later. First, I had to survive. I was assigned the worst clients. Files no one wanted. Data so messy it looked like static. But I stayed late, cleaned it, organized it, turned it into insights. They used my reports, they just never used my name. Carter once printed my analysis and handed it to the CEO without credit. When I brought it up, he laughed. "Take it as a compliment. You're making us look good." I smiled, went back to my desk. But that night I didn't sleep. I opened a blank spreadsheet, and I started sketching something that wasn't for them. It was for me. A tool, a system, a future. I named the file Phase 1, because I knew one day this would be more than just data. It would be my weapon. I didn't tell anyone, didn't quit, didn't complain. I stayed, and I listened. Every meeting, every whisper, every flaw in their process, I documented it all. I became invisible, so I could see everything. And while they were busy ignoring me, I was building something so precise, so powerful, they wouldn't even see it coming. This was never about proving I belonged. It was about making sure they'd never forget me. And trust me, they wouldn't. They thought I'd stay silent. But I wasn't quiet because I was weak. I was quiet because I was working. Every insult I filed it. Every meeting they excluded me from, I documented it. Every time my work got passed around without my name on it, I made a note. Not out of bitterness, out of precision. Because I knew one day this would all be evidence. Not for a lawsuit, but for a legacy. The firm had no idea who I really was. To them, I was just Whitney from the program. But before I ever set foot in that building, I was already thinking bigger. I didn't grow up with money, but I grew up watching my mother run a corner store in Bronzeville with the discipline of a CEO. I knew hustle. I knew numbers. I knew survival. So when I walked into Everline and saw the cracks in their system, I didn't just survive it. I studied it. The inefficiencies, the arrogance, the over-reliance on outdated tools. They thought they were too big to fail, but they were too blind to evolve, and that's where I came in. At night, I started developing a tool, an AI-powered financial insight engine, one that could clean data in minutes, flag inconsistencies, and even predict risks based on market behavior. While they partied at rooftop bars, I coded. While they mocked ESG reports, I built algorithms to optimize them. While Danielle posted vacation selfies from Santorini, I trademarked my software's name, WJ Analytics. And then came the moment everything shifted. It was a Thursday morning. Marcus, the VP, called a meeting. Everyone in the conference room, except me. I found out through a forwarded calendar invite, 5 minutes before it started. When I walked in, Danielle gave me a look that said you weren't supposed to be here. And Carter, he smirked and said, we were just about to begin. Then he stood up, clicked through slides, presenting projections, my charts, my work. No credit, no mention. That was the final push. That night, I went home, sat on my worn-out couch, and stared at my whiteboard. At the center, I wrote quit or level up. And then I circled level up. The next day, I filed my LLC, bought a domain, scheduled 5 coffee meetings with ex-colleagues from previous internships, not to vent, to pitch. Within 2 weeks, I had 3 beta clients, each one blown away by the precision of my tool. They didn't care where I worked before. They only cared that I could save them time and money. I kept things small, lean, nights and weekends. Every paycheck from Everline went into building my platform. They didn't even notice. Why would they? They thought I was a ghost. Then came the internal memo. Everline was downsizing, selling off space. The 42nd floor, our floor, was being listed quietly. I called the number at the bottom of the listing, asked one question. How much for the entire floor? The voice on the other end paused, then said, depends who's asking. Whitney Johnson, I'm buying through WJ Holdings. 2 weeks later, the deal closed. Cash, no mortgage, no fanfare, just paperwork and silence. On Friday, I handed in my resignation. Carter barely looked up. Leaving already, he said. I nodded, smiled. Time to build something of my own. Danielle didn't even say goodbye. But that didn't matter. Because Monday morning, they came in to find the Everline logo being taken down from the glass wall, and a new one going up WJ Analytics, built from precision, not privilege. Danielle's desk gone, Carter's office empty. The entire floor was mine, and the conference room the one they laughed in. It had a new plaque outside Whitney Johnson, founder and CEO. They thought I didn't belong, so I bought the space they thought belonged to them. Not with revenge, but with receipts. Not with rage, but with results. That's the thing about silence. It doesn't mean you're powerless. It means you're planning. And my plan, it was flawless. But owning the floor wasn't the real victory. The real win was what came after. I hired a small, sharp team, 3 analysts, 1 developer, and a brilliant product designer I met during a tech summit in New York. We didn't just work, we sprinted. In 6 weeks, we launched the first beta of our financial prediction engine, and the industry noticed fast. One of our first demo clients was a mid-sized investment firm in Dallas. After 2 weeks using our software, their quarterly risk margin dropped by 18%. They signed a 1-year contract without blinking. Then another. Within 3 months, we had 12 active clients and our revenue passed 6 figures, and that's when Carter emailed me. He didn't mention the past, just wrote, "Hey Whitney, heard about what you're building. Congrats. If you're ever open to collaborating, let's grab coffee." I read it twice, then archived it. No reply. Danielle didn't write, but she did start following me on LinkedIn. And one morning, I saw her browsing our careers page. Analytics doesn't lie. Our system flagged her IP. I smiled. See, I didn't build WJ Analytics to prove anything to them. I built it because I saw a gap, because I knew I could fill it better than anyone. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel satisfying. Watching them scramble, watching the firm that once laughed at me lose market share because they couldn't evolve, because they were too busy being comfortable. Meanwhile, we were in motion, adaptive, fast, fearless. One day, a junior analyst from Everline reached out. Her name was Maya. She wrote, "Hi Whitney. I've admired your journey. I'm trying to grow in this industry, but it's hard. Would love to learn from you." I invited her to the office. She walked in, wide-eyed, saw the open space, the diverse team, the culture built on listening. She said, "This feels like the future," and I told her that's because it is. I made her our first intern. 6 months later, she was leading product research, because that's what power is. Not gatekeeping, not mocking. It's creating a space where others can rise with you. And in that same glass room where I was once ignored, I now host workshops, teach, share, build. No smirks, no whispering, only clarity, only growth, only legacy. I didn't just reclaim my voice. I turned it into an empire. And I did it the way they never saw coming, silently, strategically, unstoppably. The floor was mine now. But ownership wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. People think revenge is loud, messy, explosive. Mine wasn't. It was quiet, structured, and permanent. I walked through the office on Monday morning, heels echoing through halls that used to carry whispers. Now they carried progress. Desks once filled with smirks were now empty or occupied by people who believed in building something real. There were no more Carter meetings, no more Danielle side-eyes. Just clarity, focus, growth. We had launched version 2.0 of the platform, and this time, it wasn't just about efficiency. It was predictive, insightful, unignorable. WJ Analytics was no longer a whisper in the industry. We were making noise, not on purpose, just by being good. Too good to ignore. Tech journals started writing about us. The silent takeover, one article called it. Another, she bought the floor, now she owns the game. But that wasn't why I built it. It wasn't for headlines. It was for the next woman. The next Whitney. The girl sitting in a corner, doubting if her voice matters. I wanted her to see the name on the building and remember, your silence is not your weakness. It's your strategy. We started hosting mentorship lunches. I made it a rule, one seat at the table must be reserved for someone overlooked, not to fill a quota, but to balance the scale. I once sat in a room where no one saw me. Now, I sit in a room where I never let anyone feel that way again. One afternoon, I got a call, private number. I picked up. This is Carter. I paused, not because I was surprised, but because I already knew this would happen. I wanted to say congratulations. You really made something out of nothing. He chuckled, like it was all just a game, like he hadn't tried to erase me. Thank you, I said. He kept talking, about maybe grabbing coffee, about maybe working together in some way. I let him speak. Then I said, Carter, I built something out of everything, not nothing. Everything you ignored, everything you laughed at, every late night and closed door. That's what made this. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then fair enough, click. That was the last I heard from him. Danielle never called, but she did apply, under a different name. Fake email, altered resume. But I remembered the writing, the way she phrased things. I'd read enough of her emails to recognize the tone. I didn't reject her, I just didn't respond. Because some people deserve your silence, not your energy. And while they faded into the background, we expanded. We opened a satellite office in Atlanta, hired a head of strategy from a Fortune 500, closed a 7-figure deal with a West Coast hedge fund. But my favorite moment, it wasn't the money, or the press. It was the day Maya walked into my office with tears in her eyes. She had just closed her first client independently. She said, "No one ever trusted me like this before." And I said, "That's why I built this. Because I didn't want to be the exception. I wanted to change the rule. That's what real revenge looks like. Not taking back what they took from you, but creating something they can't touch, can't dismiss, can't erase. Something that lives beyond you, that echoes, that rewrites the rules. They thought I didn't belong. Now they walk through buildings that carry my name, apply to jobs that bear my initials, use tools built from my hands. And me, I just keep building, quietly, strategically, unstoppably, because sometimes power doesn't shout. It simply stands still and lets the world catch up. We launched our first conference that year. Not just a product showcase, a movement. We called it From Margin to Main Stage. Over 300 attendees, founders, fund managers, students. I opened with one sentence: power doesn't come from being allowed in. It comes from building your own door. After the event, I met a woman named Lucia. She had tears in her eyes. She said, "I was about to quit. Then I heard your story. That's when I knew. This was bigger than me." We started an initiative, WJ Rising, free mentorship, startup seed grants, tools for underrepresented founders. It wasn't charity, it was justice. And through it all, I kept the same routine. Early mornings, late nights, every code line checked, every client call answered, every intern mentored. Because you can't build legacy on ego. You build it on consistency, on precision, on purpose. One day, I was walking down Michigan Avenue. A billboard caught my eye. A major consulting firm advertising their new data suite. Their tagline, predict, prevent, perform. The exact same slogan we used 2 years ago. I laughed, out loud, because even the ones who tried to shut us out now copy us. And that's impact. We don't scream, we echo, and the echo always reaches farther than the noise. So let them talk, let them scoff, let them underestimate, because I'm not done, not even close. This is just the blueprint and the foundation. What comes next is legacy. And legacy that doesn't need validation, it writes its own story. And mine, it started in silence, but it ends in stone, etched into every floor they once tried to erase me from, now carrying my name in gold. Months passed, then a year. We weren't just thriving, we were shaping the industry. Our model became a case study at Kellogg. Tech investors flew in from both coasts to understand how we scaled so fast. The answer was simple. We listened where others talked. We learned where others bragged. We built what others ignored. One afternoon, I stood at the window of my office, looking out over the city that once tried to shrink me. I thought about my mother, how she balanced inventory and bills by hand, how she told me, "They don't have to like you, baby. Just make sure they remember your work." And now they do. Every quarterly report that uses our platform, every pitch deck built with our insights, every floor that once silenced someone, now powered by someone like her, like me, like us. So no, this was never just about the floor. It was about what you build when no one is watching, and who you become when no one expects anything of you. Because I was never just hired, I was planted, and they didn't see me grow until I became the forest they couldn't cut down. Success changes a lot of things. It changes how people see you, how they speak to you, how they suddenly remember your name, even though they never used it before. But what it doesn't change is how you got here. And I never let myself forget. Every time I walk past that glass wall with my name etched in gold, I remember the whispering, the smirks, the silence. But I don't hold it in bitterness. I hold it as blueprint, a reminder of what not to become. Analytics had grown faster than even I expected. We moved from 1 floor to 2, from 12 employees to 70, and yet, every Monday morning, I still arrived before sunrise. Because legacy doesn't rest. It sharpens itself daily. One Monday, there was a knock at my door. My assistant opened it, peeking in. "You have a visitor," she said. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when the door opened, I saw her. Danielle. She looked smaller than I remembered, still dressed to perfection, but something behind the eyes had shifted. "Whitney," she said, carefully. "I didn't know how else to reach you." I nodded slowly, gestured to the chair. She sat down like it was foreign territory. "I've been following your journey," she said, "and I just wanted to say, you proved us wrong." I tilted my head, not with pride, not with anger, just listening. "Back then, we didn't see it," she continued. "I didn't see it. I was competitive, maybe threatened." I smiled softly. "You didn't have to see it. You just had to respect it." There was a long silence. Then she asked something I didn't expect. "Do you believe people can change?" I looked her in the eye. "I believe people can grow, but not everyone does." She nodded. And just like that, she stood. No job request, no pitch, just a reckoning. She left with more grace than she ever showed me back then. And I let her go, because some victories aren't loud. They're quiet, like doors that close with dignity. The real challenge wasn't building WJ Analytics. It was protecting it. As we grew, so did the attention. We were approached by multiple buyers, acquisition offers, mergers, IPO speculation. But I wasn't interested in flipping it for profit. I wanted to flip the narrative. So I stayed private, selective, obsessed with quality, and my team. They followed my lead. We built with care, with clarity, with intent. Then came the government contract, a pilot program for predictive fraud detection. We won it against firms 10 times our size. The media lit up, but for me it was never about headlines. It was about impact. Every system we optimized meant fewer people hurt, fewer blind spots, more precision. And through it all, I stayed rooted in the silence that once shaped me. I mentored young women, shared my story at conferences, but I never used it as a sob tale, only as proof that you can be erased and still rebuild. You can be overlooked and still rise. And you can be quiet and still shake the room. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I saw a young woman standing at the glass. She was staring at my name on the wall. She turned and said, "I'm starting as a junior analyst next week. I just wanted to see it for myself." "See what I asked?" She smiled. "That someone like me can be up there." I walked with her to the elevator, and before the doors closed, I said, "You won't just be up there. One day, you'll build your own." And I meant it. Because what's the point of owning the floor if you don't open the next door? Legacy is not made from winning alone. It's made from lifting while you climb. They said I didn't belong, but I didn't just take the floor. I made it sacred ground. A place where silence is respected, where intelligence isn't questioned, where power wears humility. This is not just a company. It's a declaration that we are here, and we are not leaving quietly. 2 weeks later, I was invited to give the commencement speech at Northwestern, my alma mater, the place where I first dared to dream beyond what people expected of me. As I stood on that stage, facing hundreds of young eyes full of questions and fire, I didn't talk about titles, or numbers, or floors. I talked about silence, the silence of being overlooked, the silence of being doubted, the silence you learn to hold like a weapon. I told them that silence doesn't mean you're empty, it means you're preparing. I told them that the world doesn't hand out space. You build it, quietly, relentlessly, brick by brick. After the ceremony, a professor came up to me. He said, "You used to sit in the back of my stats class. I remember. You barely spoke." I smiled. I was listening. And that's the thing. Most people talk to be seen, but I learned to see by being silent. In the following months, we launched WJ Labs, a research and development wing dedicated to designing tools for underfunded schools, data equity, education access, predictive tools for scholarship forecasting. It had nothing to do with profit. It had everything to do with purpose. People began to notice, not just the press, but students, mothers, teachers. They sent emails, letters. Sometimes they just said thank you. And those thank yous, they meant more than any investment round. Because I wasn't building a tech empire. I was building mirrors, so that anyone who had ever been erased could see themselves again. So yes, I own the floor now. But more than that, I own my voice, my path, my purpose. And if you're listening to this, if you've ever been dismissed, belittled, underestimated, let them talk. Let them doubt. But you keep building. Keep writing. Keep showing up in rooms they never wanted you in until one day. Those rooms belong to you. And when they do, don't just sit at the table. Rebuild the table. Make space. And when you're done, name the floor after every person who ever thought you couldn't. Fan 5. You don't just build a legacy, you become it. And legacies, they're not built in boardrooms. They're built in silence, in rejection, in the moments you're told you don't belong but show up anyway. It's been 5 years since I bought the floor. 5 years since I turned a whispered insult into a company that now advises Fortune 100s. And every time someone walks through our doors, I ask them one question. What did the world try to silence in you? Because that's where the real story begins. Not in titles, not in stock prices, but in the fire they tried to put out and failed. WJ Analytics now powers over 300 companies. We operate in 7 countries. Our software is used by universities, nonprofits, and even humanitarian agencies to predict outcomes and prevent crisis. But the heart of it all is still the same. That girl in the corner, with a notebook no one asked about, and a future no one believed in. Except her. I don't need applause. I don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. I just need the room to work better because I was in it. This final chapter isn't about proving anything. It's about planting. Planting ideas. Planting courage. Planting blueprints for those who come next. Because revenge is short-lived. but creation is eternal. We've launched a fellowship now, the Build Quietly Fellowship. Every year, we sponsor 20 women from underrepresented backgrounds to launch tech-enabled startups. They don't need permission, just tools and belief. And I give them both. One of them, a founder named Isla, grew up in a small town where no one had ever started a business. She used our fellowship to launch an app connecting rural students to online mentors. In 6 months, she reached 40,000 users. She sent me a letter. "You didn't just change my life, you changed my town." That's legacy. Not a building, not a balance sheet, but ripple effects that never stop moving. We had our first internal summit last fall. No suits, no egos, just stories, lessons, and a room full of people who once felt invisible now shining. As I closed the event, I stood on stage and said, "Power isn't about control, it's about creation, and we each of us are architects now." The room stood up, not for me, but for what we'd built together. And now we're planning the next chapter: global expansion, social impact labs, equity research schools, all built with the same foundation: silence turned into strategy, rejection turned into architecture, pain turned into blueprints. People still ask me, "Do you ever think about the ones who laughed at you?" Sometimes, but not in anger. I think about them the way you think about a rainstorm after the garden has bloomed. Necessary, but no longer the point. Because the point is what grew. The people, the tools, the spaces, the floor. They said I didn't belong, but I didn't just claim space. I transformed it. So this is for anyone still sitting in silence, still being overlooked, still wondering if they're enough. You are, not because they see you, but because you see you. And if you build quietly enough, one day they'll walk across the floor you laid, work in the rooms you imagined, speak through the tools you designed, and never know the silence it took to build them. But you will, and that's more than enough. That's everything. In the months that followed, we opened our first Equity Innovation Center. Not in New York, not in Silicon Valley, but in Detroit. Because the people with the best ideas aren't always in the flashiest places. They're in libraries, laundromats, kitchen tables, waiting for someone to believe in them. That center became a beacon, not just for entrepreneurs, but for high school students, mothers re-entering the workforce, veterans with business plans scribbled in old notebooks. We gave them laptops, mentorship, free software licenses, but more than that, we gave them space. And that space, it changed everything. A woman named Raina launched a budgeting tool for low-income families. It now serves over 100,000 users. She came to my office one day and said, "No one ever listened to me before. Thank you for giving me a place to speak." I told her, "You never needed permission, just a platform." And that's what this story has always been. Not about me, but about us. About what happens when the silenced stop shrinking and start building. This is the blueprint I leave behind. Start small, stay quiet, build loud. And when you're done, don't just look back. Reach back. Because legacy is not what you leave behind. It's what you build into others. Every floor we open now has a plaque, not with my name, but with a question: who are you making space for? That's the difference between success and significance. Success fills your name. Significance writes other names beside it. So here we are. The story they said would never happen. The woman they said wouldn't last. The company they said wasn't real. And yet we're still here, still growing, still building, still rewriting every room they tried to lock. And that's how it ends. Not with a bang, but with a foundation. So strong that even in silence, it speaks